Hi, I'm Stephanie Jaworski of joybaking.com. Today we're going to make a yogurt crumb cake, and this is what it looks like. This cake has 2 layers of a soft and moist yogurt cake, and we're going to alternate that with 2 layers of a crumb topping that's made with sugar and ground cinnamon and toasted pecans. So the first thing that you will need to do is preheat your oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 180 degrees Celsius. And you will need an 8-inch round, that's 20 centimeter, springform pan. The springform pan's got the bottom base and then the top, and it just clamps down. And you can spray the inside of your pan with one of those nonstick sprays, or today I'm going to butter my pan. So what I do is just, maybe melt like a tablespoon, about 13 grams of butter. And then with the pastry brush, I'm just going to brush the bottom and sides. We don't want this sticking. We're using a springform pan because we are layering. The top is going to have a crumb. If you used just a round pan, then you have to flip it, invert it. Remember to get it out of the pan, and then you'll lose some of your crumb topping. You can do it, but just be aware of that. So once you do that, what I'm going to do is take a round of parchment paper and put it in there. Now you could I like to get both sides buttered or greased, so you can just flip your paper over. Today what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my parchment and then just take, since I have a little butter left over, just lightly butter that parchment paper. So that's that. And the first thing, we're going to start with our crumb topping. We're going to use 1 1/4 cups, which is 125 grams. I'm using pecans today. I just love their flavor. I live in the South, that's where they grow, and so I use them. If you don't want to use pecans or you can't get them, you could use walnuts, you could use almonds, you could even use hazelnuts. I like to toast them because it really brings out, like any nut that you use, an almond or a hazelnut, it really brings out their full flavor. So what you want to do is put your nuts on a baking sheet, pop them into the oven, I'd say about 6-8 minutes until they get a little bit of color. But how you know, it doesn't matter what type of nut you use, you can start to smell them, and that's when you know to take them out of the oven. I've already done that here. And then you want to let them cool completely. And then what we want to do is finely chop them. If you have a food processor, it makes really quick work of it. So I'm going to be lazy today, and that's what I'm going to use. If you don't have a food processor, just get out your cutting board and a sharp knife and just finely chop them. Either way, let's pop those in here. And then got Carrie here with me, loves nuts. And then what I'm going to do is add 1/4 cup, 50 grams of light brown sugar, 2 1/2 tablespoons, 35 grams of a granulated white sugar, and 3/4 teaspoon of ground cinnamon. Now, if you were doing this by hand, what you would do is first finely chop your nuts, then put them in a bowl, and then just add your sugar and ground cinnamon in your bowl and just stir it. And that's your crumb top. Since I'm using a food processor, I'm just going to put everything in there and let it do the work for me. Okay, so a bit of that sugar. So that's essentially what you're looking for, just finely ground. You don't want to, if you do it too much, it kind of gets wet, so, don't get carried away. So that's our crumb topping. So I'm just going to clean up. We'll be right back, and we'll make our cake batter. So now for our yogurt cake batter. I'm going to make it by hand. You could pull out your mixer, but really this is a dump and stir cake. So I have 1 bowl for my dry ingredients and 1 for my wet, and then I just combine and I'm done. So in a large bowl, I have 1.5 cups, which is 195 grams of all-purpose flour, plain flour. To that, I'm adding 1 teaspoon, 4 grams of baking powder, a half a teaspoon, 2 grams of baking soda, and a quarter teaspoon, 1 gram. I'm using a fine kosher salt. You could use a table salt. And then with a fork, your fingers, I'm using a whisk. I'm just going to whisk all that together. I love this cake. It's one of those kind of everyday cakes. You kind of decide maybe in the afternoon, gee, I want something sweet. And you can just get in the kitchen. Within an hour, you have a cake. And that's the dry. So in another bowl, I have 2 large eggs, which is 100 grams out of the shell. Have your eggs at room temperature. So with my whisk, again, you could use a fork. I'm just going to whisk them. And next, I'm going to add 3/4 of a cup, which is 180 milliliters, 180 grams. I'm using a whole milk, which is like a full fat, plain yogurt. And have your yogurt at room temperature. This is like what, if you live in the States, what they now call like a Greek style. It's kind of, I find it's a little thicker. It's a little more tangy. It's really good. You could use a reduced fat. Now, don't use the ones with no fat. I don't like the texture for baking. You could use a reduced fat, and then you'll have a little less fat in your cake. If there's lots of water, especially with the reduced fat, drain that off. But I like the whole milk. Makes a nice, rich tasting cake. So let's whisk that in. For flavoring, I'm adding 1.5 teaspoons, 6 grams of a pure vanilla extract. If you wanted a different flavor, there's different flavors of extract, almond or orange. I mean, you could use that instead if you wanted to. And then we're using a half a cup, which is 120 milliliters, 120 grams of a flavorless oil. So that could be like a safflower, that could be a vegetable, that could be a corn, that could be a canola, or even maybe a light olive oil. I like to use oil. It makes the cake wonderfully moist. And if you like to refrigerate your cake, maybe you live in a hot climate, then the oil, if you use butter, butter kind of gets very firm when it's in the fridge, where an oil won't. So your cake, at least I find I can eat it right out of the fridge, cold. And then for our sugar, you will need 2/3 of a cup, 135 grams of granulated white sugar. I'm just going to put that in there. Whisk that in. Okay. And then we're going to put our wet into our dry, and that'll be our cake batter. I mean, is that not easy? I have, if you've been following us, I have been doing quite a few yogurt cakes, different flavors. So, you could go, the best way to find like all of our recipes in one place very easily is to go to joyabaking.com. And there you can click on the cakes. I have probably over at least 120 cake recipes. You can see it's kind of all there. So you can see the link to the YouTube for the video. You got a picture of the cake. You got the written recipe. You have the link to the print page. So check it out. If you want to try, I have a plain yogurt cake. So what I'm doing here is just with a wire whisk, you could just use your spatula. We're going to mix these together while I'm talking. I have a plain yogurt. I have an apple yogurt. I think a blueberry crumb. I have a chocolate. I have a marble. So if you like this one and you go, oh, I'd like to try more yogurt cakes, go to the joybaking.com website. One-stop shop. So there we have it. That's our batter. Now we are going to layer it. So I'm going to put half of the batter. Now, if you follow me, you know I love my scale. You can eyeball half the batter. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you know I like to be pretty precise. So I'm going to put, it's about 300 grams. I would put, normally I would put my pan right on, but my pan has that lip, and then I can't see the numbers. So that's why I'm not doing that. Okay, that's about right. I won't need my scale, so we're just gonna put that into the bottom of the pan. And then you could just use a spoon or an offset spatula. Just going to even that out in the pan as best as I can. And then we're going to put half of the crumb topping. Again, if you have a scale, it would be 105 grams in each bowl. I've already done that. But, you know, you can eyeball it. It's an everyday cake. But I can't help myself. Okay, that looks good. So I'm just gonna, now this is lots of crumb. I admit, I do like, it's kind of grainy, like gritty, and I just think it contrasts to that soft, moist cake. It's just wonderful. At least I think so. So I'm just gonna kind of lightly pat it down. So that way when we put the next layer of cake, it won't get all sticky to a stick. Okay, so that looks good. So now, I need this. We're gonna just kind of put dollops around, make it a little easier to spread out for you. And I'm going to spread that out. While I'm doing that, I'll yak a little more here. You know, some people say they subscribe to our site, but, you know, we put out a video almost every Thursday, and people are saying, I'm not getting notified. If you are not getting notified, beside the subscribe button, there's a little bell. Just push that, and that will make sure that you get notified whenever we release a new video, because you don't want to miss it. Okay, so looks good. And then I'm going to finish off final layer of crumb. If you did it by hand, I know sometimes it's a little harder to get your nuts this finely chopped. Don't worry about it. It'll just be a little more, you know, not as fine, not as grainy, but it's still really good. So don't worry. So once you do that, just kind of pat that. So we don't want to lose any. Stay on. And now, This cake takes, I'm going to say, it's usually around 40, 45 minutes. I'm giving, you know, not an exact time. And the reason is, you know, everyone's oven is a little different. So that's why it's a range. I would recommend checking to see if it's done around the 35 minute, just in case maybe your oven's a little different, it's running a little hot, or, you know, because we don't want to overbake it, because people say sometimes, well, my cake was a little dry. If it's dry just after you baked it, it's probably overbaked. So, you know, time is only one factor. Another is when you think it's done, press the center. It will feel set. If it's really like still soft, then it's not fully baked. So, and of course the toothpick, put it into the center, it should come out clean. So I'm going to say about 40 minutes, but like I said, check it around 35. And I do like to rotate my pan front to back about halfway through baking so it gets nice and even. So our yogurt crumb cake is done. See, it's turned out like a beautiful golden brown. If I touch it, it's set in the center, and a toothpick inserted into the center comes out clean. So now what we want to do is let this sit 5 to 10 minutes, and then just take a knife or an offset spatula, just run it. Actually, I'm just going to do it. You at home, wait 5 to 10 minutes. So it's a little cooler, but just run it around the inside. And then what you want to do is just release the clamp, like so, and there. And then we're going to let that cool, and then when we come back, we will try a piece. So now our cake is cooled down to room temperature. So what I'm going to do is transfer it to my serving platter. So I just have one of these large spatulas, put underneath, and so. And then let's cut a slice. There we have it. As you can see, it's got the 2 layers of cake and then that vein of the crumb in the center. Well, not quite center, but I'll say in the center. And then on top. So let's try some. I just love this type of cake. The combination, I mean, I really like this cake. The combination of a vanilla flavored cake that's soft and it's moist, and you pair that with this crumb topping with the cinnamon and then mostly brown sugar and the toasted pecans. It's just wonderful. I could eat that whole slice. Perfect with a cup of coffee, cup of tea, glass of milk. You can cover and store this for quite a few days, 3-4 days. You can freeze it. Sometimes what I do is I actually kind of cut it into slices, and then freeze it, and then defrost it in the refrigerator overnight. So then you can have it the next day. So a really wonderful cake, and you must try it. And until next time, I'm Stephanie Jaworski of joybaking.com.
Bye.